Hi, everyone. This is Suzanne Simon with Restore America's Estuaries. Thank you very much for joining us today for the Living Shorelines Community of Practice, Engaging Veterans in Living Shorelines programs. So a few housekeeping announcements before we dive into the content. Excuse me, everybody is on mute. If you want to make a comment, virtually raise your hand using the control panels of the webinar software, or you are welcome to use that same control panel to submit a question, and I can ask it on your behalf and or share it with the group. This webinar will be recorded and posted onto the Ray YouTube channel. The older ones, for the most part, are posted. We did have a bit of a backlog, but know that we are working to resolve that. So for those of you who might be new to Restore America's Estuaries, we are a group dedicated to the protection, restoration of bays and estuaries as essential resources for our nation. We do this in consultation and coordination with our 10-member groups there you can see on the map. I'm delighted to say that our speaker today, our presenter, is with American Littoral Society, which is one of our fantastic groups. So it's lovely to be able to share some of the great work that they are doing. Since you are here, you know the information and what is going to be going on in terms of the agenda. But very briefly, we'll do some quick national updates, some quick regional updates, and that is where you have a chance, again, to virtually participate. Raise your hand, and I will unmute you if you'd like to share something with the group. We will then dive into our focus topic with Q&A, and then I will provide some next steps and updates, including upcoming webinar topics. So I'll go ahead and start with the national update. I am delighted to let everybody know that our National Living Shorelines Tech Transfer Workshop, we have been able to secure the venue. For those of you who have been on previous webinars, you may remember that the venues we had tried to use previously got substantially damaged by Hurricane Florence, so it's been a little bit of a scramble. But it will be October 8th and 9th in Beaufort, North Carolina. That is October 8th and 9th of 2019. The registration will open in early summer. Check out the Ray website, which is estuaries.org for more information. Go to the Living Shorelines portion of our website. The other thing I wanted to announce on behalf of the Near Science Collaborative, they are going to be having a webinar tomorrow, 3:30 to 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time, regarding new research to inform living shoreline design, placement, and monitoring. So if you are interested in that, I would urge you to go to the Near Science Collaborative webinar series website and sign up. So on that note, I'm going to see if there are any updates that folks would like to provide. I don't see any hands raised. Going once, going twice. Okay, so we'll go ahead and Capt.
Hello?
Yeah,
hey,
hi. Would you like to share something?
I do, because I think it's pretty cool.
Go for it.
So we've been working for a while here in New Jersey and Delaware Bay, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit. But as of April 5th, we received our first Army Corps permit. It's a regional permit for us to conduct restoration for the next 10 years in Delaware Bay, doing beach restoration and intertidal reef restoration. So it's big for us because it kind of gets rid of that public notice that we don't have to worry about. It expedites review time by the Corps of up to 30 days, and we can do our project. And it allows us to kind of prioritize restoration as we receive funding. The caveat of that is each time we do a new project, we just have to do state permits. And so it's a landfall for us. It's unprecedented. It's kind of leading us hopefully down that path to a more programmatic restoration.
Fantastic, and congratulations. I know you've been working on that for quite a while, so that's fantastic news. Okay, any other updates that folks would like to provide? Either submit via the control panel or you can raise your hand. All right, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and get on to the focus topic and Q&A, which, as I said, is engaging veterans in living shorelines programs. I'm delighted to introduce Capt. He is a professional ecologist, a fisheries biologist, and the Habitat Restoration Program Director for the American Littoral Society. Capt. has over 20 years of experience in science-based coastal restoration and biological monitoring. On behalf of the Society, he currently manages a number of restoration projects throughout New Jersey and New York. These projects include living shorelines, beach restoration, salt marsh restoration, flood control, and fish passage. He is also a U.S. Air Force Desert Storm veteran. So with that, I will hand over controls to Capt. Take it away.
Okay. Can everybody see this? You got it, Suzanne?
Great. Yep, looks great.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, thanks, Suzanne, and thanks for having me today to kind of present a little bit about our U.S. Military Veterans Program. For those of you that don't know about the American Littoral Society, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and our mission statement is we care for the coast, and we empower others to care for the coast as well. And we do that through advocacy, conservation, and education. So, and Suzanne did mention some of the projects that we are working on. Currently, I have about 12 restoration projects. A few of them are going in the next couple weeks. But we have within these restoration projects other programs, and they can include a citizen science program. For one of my projects, I have over 54 citizen scientists that monitor for us. We also have oyster wranglers that help grow oysters for us and bag shell. And but what I'm going to talk about today is another portion of this, and that's our U.S. Military Veterans Intern program. I do want to acknowledge two of my staff. I want to acknowledge Quinn and Shane, seen here on the bottom of the screen, for helping me put some of this presentation together. There we go. And I just want to briefly just thank our partners and let everyone know who funded this. It was funded post-Sandy by National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services, William Penn, and the Geraldine Dodge Foundation. But before I discuss more about the U.S. military veterans, I want to give you the bigger picture of just what this project is. So this was a big coastal resiliency project that we received right after Sandy, and it involved pretty much restoring 8 beaches. We put about 200,000 cubic yards of sand on these beaches. We removed a lot of rubble, about 2,051 tons of rubble. We started a whole sand transport study, and this is key because that sand transport study would have been a lot more money if we didn't have our U.S. military veterans helping us out. We've tagged over 18,000 crabs, horseshoe crabs. We've also built and monitored 5 intertidal reefs to keep the sand on the beach. They're basically positioned on the beaches that we restored. We have another one going, or 3 going in August, and we're putting sand on the beaches right now and getting ready for the horseshoe crab. So I just want to give a broader piece because the Veterans Program is just a piece of this restoration. And this just kind of gives you an idea of what it looked like after Sandy. If you haven't seen these before, Delaware Bay was pretty much destroyed, and then we came on and added sand. And the photo I always like is the last photo here of Moore's Beach, where it kind of shows here's what we've done, you know, and here's the crabs coming back to reap those benefits. So through this, we started a U.S. Veterans Internship, and it basically stems from the grant. We added in so they could be paid. And right now we topped out at 13 U.S. military veterans, and I'm going to go through pretty much what they do and how we keep them engaged in the program. I mean, the money helps, of course, but when we did one of our movies called The Hidden Coast, which is about Delaware Bay and the restoration work we did, one of the vets just said he would have come for free. It was just something he didn't even know existed out here, and to be a part of that was fantastic for him. So they help with a lot of stuff, and I'm going to go through that with LEO data, LEO being littoral observations. We do horseshoe crab tagging, like I said, reef construction, the biological monitoring. Some of these guys didn't even know, what a crab was, and they learn how to ID species. They provide community outreach. These guys have some of the best stories, and they talk about the American Littoral Society and the work we do to everyone. So it's been really, really good for that kind of a PR piece. And they also became stewards of the bay. So how did it get started? Well, when we got this grant, we wrote into it, of course. I want to say it was about $15 an hour, which is a good wage for up to 10 U.S. veterans. We topped that out again, like I said, at 13. But it was funded through a NIFWIF-funded resiliency grant. And what we did, we just needed help monitoring. So why not vets? And we worked it into our grant. Like I said, they're from all branches. So we have the Army, Navy, Marines, we have Coast Guard, Air Force, which I'm also a member of the Air Force, vet. And these guys range from age, I guess, well, to better put it in a way, from the Korean War all the way up to they just got out yesterday, you know? So how do we really get it started, though? After we had this funding through our grant, we placed ads for this kind of call of duty with a meeting time and a date. And we waited for people to show up in our Millville office, and we sat them down, and we had kind of what we wanted to just call a squad briefing, you know, and it was really interesting when we had these guys all sitting together, all different ages, telling stories, and we had about maybe 6 or 7, and we asked them questions about, you know, what do you feel you could give to the Bay, or what have you done in your career? How can we use you as a resource? And it turned out that some of these guys, one guy was even like a black belt in karate, and he was like 70 years old. So it's pretty interesting, the physical capabilities of these guys and ladies as we move forward. So after we kind of talked to everybody, just like in any kind of military venue, we made sure we collected lots of paperwork and processed them through in a way. And then we started training them. And I put in here kind of a basic training, just make a play on words, but these vets, ranging in all different ages, had to be retrained. And they had to learn kind of the work that we do. And it was pretty interesting. I'm going to show you here in the next slide. I just wanted to mention, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, about the United States Fish and Wildlife Service Partners Program, who now funds us for our veterans program, or partially funds us for our veterans program statewide. So we talked briefly, I went over what littoral environmental observation data collection that they were performing this. Well, here's what it is. And it was led by Stockton University as they're creating this tool, the Delaware Bay Sand Transport Analysis Tool, which is a tool that we use to kind of figure out where sand is starved, where we have sand, grain size. We looked at wave height, we looked at current, fetch, all kinds of things. So it kind of gives us that higher elevation look down of how we might configure a reef, or what kind of sand we're going to put on the beach when we're trying to restore these things for the horseshoe crab and the federally listed red knot. So you can see a bunch of the vets here, they're being trained. They're learning how to collect wave period, type, angle, and height, the wind speed and direction, longshore current, beach cuts, all these kind of things that can be inputted or imported into the model, or the Delaware Bay Sand Transport Analysis Tool. And I'll probably refer to that more as DB stat if I go farther. But we also talked about a horseshoe crab tag. And right now, it's kind of difficult for us with only 2 staff down in my Delaware Bayshore office, that's Shane and Quinn, to manage over 800 people of volunteers that come through to tag crabs with us. We do it every year. We've tagged almost 18,500 crabs since Sandy. And we use these veterans, and you can see them in the pictures here again, to be beach captains. So once they learn how to tag crabs, they would work with the volunteers that came in at separate beaches. We were pretty much working on probably 8 beaches, pretty much, throughout Delaware Bay on the New Jersey side of the Bayshore. And that can expand as long as we have veterans there to help us. And you can see kind of the hours put in here, number of crabs surveyed. It's big numbers, so we definitely needed some help. They help us bag shell. One of the things that's interesting about our 5 intertidal reefs, and these intertidal reefs probably extend about 2,000 linear feet in all. They're about 2 feet high. But every shell placed in there was hand-bagged by either our veterans or by volunteers. So we estimate that's about 12,500 bags of shell that were bagged by hand, and we're bagging now 7,500 more for 3 more reefs that I said we're going to put in August. And all this is done by volunteers and by hand. So it's pretty interesting to have these guys here and actually help out doing that type of work as well. And then we build reefs, and you can see on the bottom of the slide here, there's just a basic kind of diagram or schematic of what our reefs really look like. And they're a herringbone-shaped double road, and they have gaps in between each segment to allow the crabs and the fish and the things like that to kind of move through. They are intertidal, and what we do every year, we're going to have our 5th or 6th annual one this year coming up in August, is a celebration, and we call it that, kind of get people in. We feed them. We have barbecue at the end, but we build reefs, and we've built reefs anywhere between a couple hours to a few weeks, depending. And when it gets really bad weather and real foul, which you'll see here in the second annual celebration, and you can see the number of people at this one. There's maybe a handful that came. We were in a full-on blizzard, and our veterans really came forth, and it kind of really showed me, you know, their commitment and their mettle. You know, this is what a military veteran's about. They'll go through just about anything to get the job done, and we really appreciated that. This reef took us here. This is at Moores Beach. It took us about 2 weeks because we had to come back out, and we didn't have any more volunteers after that, so this was all built pretty much by veterans. And then finally, a nice and easier one with a little bit of sunshine. This was Dyer's Cove, and you can see the amount of shell and the amount of people all taking that shell out. And again, in the bottom picture is one of our veterans standing there bagging shell as we're working. So again, we keep these guys engaged by being down at the beaches, being on the front of restoration for us. And then kind of to talk them other things like reef biodiversity monitoring. So on the reefs, we're looking at the succession of the reefs, and we're seeing what's inhabiting them. And we do that basically with fish pots, and then we also take random bags. Our one reef at Reed's Beach, we no longer can sample the way we've been sampling because it's so encrusted with oysters that we now have to do more of a transect sampling versus pulling bags and looking at species and counting species and enumerating them. But we honor our vets. So the best way for us to really honor our veterans is have Veterans Day on the bay. And we've had this, I think, for 5 years in a row. What we do on this is we dedicate the reef to a branch of service. Our first reef, of course, was honoring all veterans, so it was named Veterans Reef. We currently have Army Reef, Air Force Reef, Coastie Reef, and I think Navy Reef. So we're getting Navy or Marine. We're getting ready to do one of those branches this year. And what we do is we take whelk shells and we invite people down. Again, we always feed them, so we give them some barbecue. And they can inscribe on a shell a veteran that they hold dear or a loved one that they hold dear that served in the military. And at the end of the day, we take these shells and they place them on the reef, so those veterans are a part of our restoration overall. And it's really heartwarming to see all the people that show up and what they write on their shells, and it's rather moving actually. So we're glad we can do this, and usually our veterans help run the show that day, so they'll assist in parking cars and doing things like that. They kind of stay out of the picture a lot. They don't want to get that much recognition, but we really try to give it to them. So lessons learned, because part of this was what did you learn as you created this? Creating it's not really the problem. Getting it out there and letting veterans know that you have some kind of opportunity for them, they'll find you. And it seemed like having our own veteran team, those 13 guys that we have, they're good word of mouth, and they were talking to the younger vets, and those are the new vets that we would get in as some of the older ones might leave. So it worked well. But travel costs, if you're going to add that in, Delaware Bay is kind of like at the end of the earth when you think about it here in New Jersey. And there was travel involved, and we paid them for travel, but it can get expensive. So if you can get a suite or a stable of participants that are more local, that's helpful. For engagement, we engage all ages. So whether they're doing the restoration, the monitoring, and I didn't really mention much about some of the outreach events that we do with them, and we were even training one veteran to do beach walks with people because he wanted to just talk to people and show them things that he learned from us. So we kind of engaged everyone on basically on what they were able to do physically and mentally. We did learn that they're very committed and dedicated, and if you remember when I showed you the picture of the one reef at Moores where the full-on blizzard was, our veterans worked hard, and they were committed and dedicated to get the job done because they were doing something good for the environment. Equipment, they get a lot. They love the equipment, and now they get fish and wildlife training, which I'll talk about in a minute, on other equipment that they'll help out on other restoration projects. And like I said, these guys had great stories. They're always talking to somebody, and it was really good public relations for us through word of mouth to people locally as well as where they lived farther away. One of the other lessons learned was it's not always long-term. We had vets come and go. So we have some vets that might come in and work for a couple weeks until they found their way, and they would head off. Some of the older vets, they would stay with us for a couple years, but then they physically couldn't make it anymore. So it's always good to keep a standing kind of a roster of guys and gals who can come out and work for you. And then, work with your partners. We have a lot of good partners through this grant. And one of those, I would say, that really came out of it is the United States Fish and Wildlife Service Partners Program. And if you're not familiar with it, it's in every state. And what the Fish and Wildlife Service does is they basically, you sign an agreement with them, with the private landowner. What we've been doing is signing them with municipalities and, others who may have some kind of a piece of the beach that's theirs, or the reef or the marsh where we're doing work. And what it does, it protects that area for up to 10 years. And then Fish and Wildlife, they'll turn around and they'll train people, they'll give you technical support, they'll provide equipment, and in times they can give you a little bit of funding as well as some plants and things like that we may not always have for our restoration projects. But for this partners program and us, what happened was it wasn't just beaches and reefs anymore. We went statewide with it, and Fish and Wildlife is now funding partially pretty much the majority of our U.S. Veterans program. And these guys now are not just working on beaches and reefs, but they're working in the marsh. They're working in the riparian zones. They're building living shorelines. We're getting new recruits for them because this is providing new energy into our program. But they get really cool training too. So some of the training that they get now through the Partners program and the Partners project statewide is they'll get trained on things like a mud ox or a marsh master or a backhoe. They get trained on mowers, different things like that, and they can kind of pick the project where if it's closer to home, which kind of solves our get local only kind of bets, a project closer to home that they can work on where they feel comfortable. So I really want to thank Fish and Wildlife Service for really carrying the torch for us to let us continue this U.S. Veterans program. And that's the new U.S. Fish and Wildlife Partners Program grant that we received. We just got awarded, so it's kicking in, and we're going to start this work probably in the next couple of weeks with the oncoming of spring. So that's pretty much all I had. I hope I wasn't too long for everybody, and I hope you understand a little bit more about our U.S. Military Veterans Program. Thank you.
That was great, Captain Al. Thank you so much. So we do have, and it was a perfect amount of time. So thank you for that. Could you talk a little bit more about some of the outreach that you have done?
Now, are you talking for the veterans or?
Yeah.
Oh,
yep. So.
Well, what we do, so the events for Delaware Bay are different from our other projects, which now a lot of our projects are morphing together under this U.S. Fish and Wildlife Partners Program. So it gives us more flexibility on using our veterans on other projects. But most of the time we do a lot of this on social media. We have gone through, say, to promote Veterans Day on the Bay, we have gone through our local Naval, Air Force, and Army bases, or posts, or however you want to call it. We've talked to their communications people, and they've put it out. We have Navy Station Earl located right across from us on Raritan Bay, and we have good contacts there where we actually get participants from Navy Station Earl that drive 2 hours down to Delaware Bay to bag shell. So we kind of set up a network, at least with the veterans. For the other stuff, it's always social media, newspapers, press events. We work with NIFWIF, with their communications people. We've worked with Ray. We've also worked with United States Fish and Wildlife Service through their websites and their channels to really get the word out about the events that we're doing.
That's great. And if I recall correctly, you also have some videos that you have used in the past, recording, for example, some of your Veterans Day events that then go up on the website, right?
Yeah, hold on one second. There you go. That was my phone. Sorry. We do. So we have, if you go on, you can go online, and I think it's on the back here, www.restorenjbayshore.org. And on that website, you can look at all the work we've done in Delaware Bay. There's also a movie that we put out called The Hidden Coast. And it's either you can watch the full length, but I think we have the 5 episodes on there, 5 or 6 episodes. And they don't last very long. I think they're like 5 minutes tops. And there's one actually dedicated to the veterans and kind of talks about the work that we're doing out there and the program itself. So we do have that. If you go on and you look on YouTube, say for Dyer Cove, D-Y-E-R, Cove, Reef Build, you can see how we built the reef at Dyer's Cove with our veterans. If you go on YouTube and look up Thompson's Marsh Restoration, you're going to see how 12 of us, and only one of our veterans showed up for that, but we actually contained an acre of marsh with coir and raised the elevation of that marsh by 2 feet. And these guys helped us lay all the coir and played with us in the muck. So those are a few.
That's great. And one of the things that I really like about this is that I haven't seen many programs like it in this space. In other words, in kind of the coastal restoration realm. Is that correct, or have you heard about other programs that are like this in other parts of the country?
I have not. I'm sure they may exist, but we haven't heard of anything like that we have here in New Jersey. I know at not last Ray conference, but the conference before, when we showed the Hidden Coast and we talked about the military veterans, I know quite a few people came up to me and said, hey, how can I do that in my state? Or how did you do that? So I'm glad I get to talk about it today a little bit. But it's a lot of ingenuity, and just once you get it started, keeping the momentum up and keeping those veterans engaged.
So let's say let's build on that. So if someone does want to start it, where do they begin? I mean, I know you said that you kind of send ads out and things like that, but let's say for people. So, and I think you are at an advantage to a certain extent, Capt, because you are a veteran yourself. So I think you speak the language, right? So that might be daunting to somebody who might not have a military background. So what advice would you give somebody, if they really did want to engage? Like I can think of some places like, you've got all of those folks down in Newport News. You have some big hubs all around the country where you probably have a lot of veterans that can be, put to continue their service in a new way. So what would be your advice to those folks, particularly if they don't have any military background?
So I would think the first thing that we want to look up is Veteran Affairs. If U.S. Veteran Affairs, if you look online, the department, and then they can probably get you some local contacts, or you can just go online and search in your area. There's a ton of military veterans groups that deal with disabled veterans. And we have one of the guys, he's actually in charge of it, that works with us on Operation Oyster, where we have the oyster wranglers grow oysters for us. And it's been a good way for us to kind of work with those guys. So I always look at Veterans Affairs. I try to contact someone locally if you have a base or a post nearby. Believe it or not, colleges, if you post at college, U.S. Veterans Wanted, a lot of vets go to college once they get out on their GI Bill or whatever they have now. Maybe it's the Montgomery Bill now, but I know I did, and that's kind of how I found a lot of opportunity too. So we went to the colleges. There's also, I don't have the contact with me, but there's an Armed Forces Radio Network, and there's a show on that network. And that gentleman reached out to me because he wanted to do kind of an interview about our program and get the word out there. So there's all kinds of ways you can get the word out there. But the way to kind of do it is just say U.S. Veterans Wanted, and just find those venues where you think they may be looking. If you post it on Facebook, I don't know, you name it. We did everything, and it was good that we actually put it in the newspapers because our older veterans, they're not really in social media, so they're looking at hard copy things,
Interesting. Yeah, and I think that's valid. Actually, it has nothing to do with veterans, but I ran into somebody yesterday, an older woman who asked me for my phone number because she doesn't like to use email, and that's sort of like another step removed. Yeah. So I do have a comment. There's someone out in California, Bob, who would like to share some of the some information on a program with which he is familiar. Bob, I have unmuted you if you'd like to share.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, sounds great.
Hey, Alec, thanks so much for the presentation. I just wanted to give you an idea of a project that we've been working on out here in California since 2012. It's called the NOAA CCC, which stands for California Conservation Corps, Veterans Corps Fishery Program, where we kind of started hiring post 9/11 vets through the California Conservation Corps, which is a youth development program for veterans that are 18 to 30 to work to help NOAA trust resources. Out here we have threatened and endangered salmon and steelhead and abalone, and we hire these folks and we give them a bunch of training, and we get them to work either in our office, NOAA offices, or state California Fish and Wildlife offices, or the U.S. Forest Service, and we give them kind of a well-rounded experience restoring these creeks and bays and estuaries, and then doing a lot of the monitoring, the population monitoring, to help assess the status and trends of these critters that we care about over here. And since 2012, we've had about 40 veterans go through the program and receive employment afterwards. And we've actually expanded from California. We started with just 2 sites as a pilot in 2012 and 13, and then since then we've gone all up and down the coast: Sacramento, San Luis Obispo, Camarillo, Ukiah, Orleans, and Fortuna in California. And then Washington started a program up there about 3 years ago, where we have veterans working for our science center up there doing similar stuff, monitoring fish populations with the science center. And then we just started one up in Oregon with the Mount Adams Institute being our major partner there, working in the Tillamook Bay estuary. One of the elements that our headquarters really liked about that was the grassroots coordination efforts, and then how it essentially would help monitor and restore projects and threatened and endangered species for our trust resources. So this program is, if you just Google NOAA Veterans Corps, it'll take you to our page and you can learn more about that. But I just wanted to let you know that there are programs that exist out there similar to what you guys are doing. And I just thank you for the presentation and your service and the work you're doing with these veterans.
Thanks, Bob. That's quite a program you got going up there. I'm definitely going to check that out. I have a question back at you real quick. And I didn't put this in my PowerPoint, but it's not always full-time work. Are the guys in the NOAA Corps, are they full-time, part-time, salaried? I mean, how does that work? We just paid our guys hourly when we had work.
Sure. With California, so because they're partnered with the California Conservation Corps, they do other stuff. So they provide 33% match, and we provide 2/3 of the funding. So when they're working on CCC match time, they're either getting chainsaw safety certified, or they're working on firefighting training, or they're doing all the other things that the CCC does besides us. And then when we give them to a partner, let's say we'll give them to the Forest Service for the winter, because that's when their spawner surveys for salmon are really hot and heavy. And then we'll take them and we can move them to another site, and they can get a whole bunch of other experience doing maybe either habitat surveys or downstream migrant trapping surveys in the spring and the summer. So we have enough things going on that we can move folks around. And then the CCC with their non-fisheries related programs that are still valuable for these veterans can kind of fill the time in between.
And you said it's state and federally funded through NOAA? Or when you said 33%, 66%, how's that work?
So we provide the California program for about 8 to 10 veterans a year costs somewhere around $250,000, and the California Conservation Corps, they don't necessarily, they have money in their general fund budget to keep them busy working on non-reimbursable projects, like for the state highway system that they can help do some, vegetation clearing on the side of the road. And that's part of their quote unquote match that they're providing. So they're paying these folks for about 1/3 of their time to do other non-fisheries related things. The idea here is to get these folks as much of a diverse experience and skills as they possibly can have, because we're not really paying them much. We're paying them essentially minimum wage, and but they're getting incredible amounts of experience, and they because they're working through the California Conservation Corps, they have the opportunity for a AmeriCorps scholarship of, I think it's $4,700 if they complete a year, and they can do up to 2 years and get that. So they can use about $9,000 to $10,000 worth of AmeriCorps scholarships to either go pay for education they've already gotten, or to advance their education after the program with all the different diverse experience that they have.
Cool, thank you.
Bob, this is Suzanne. I do have another 2 questions, if I may. So you heard Capt Mal talk about how they've done outreach. Is your experience in bringing on folks into this program similar, or have you had a different success or approaches with getting folks into the program?
We do have a lot of challenges getting folks in the program. One, we're limited to 18 to 30-year-old folks, so that limits you right there. The outreach is kind of hard. The CCC has a recruitment force in every single office, so we were lucky that infrastructure already existed because they're recruiting people for the regular CCC Youth Development Program year round anyway. So that definitely helps. We've gone to job fairs and we put out Craigslist ads, and we do a lot of web stories and kind of send that out to email lists. And we work with the recruiters. We went to a veteran suicide prevention program, and we made a lot of different contacts with, the VA and Cal Vets and a bunch of different veteran associated organizations, and followed up with those folks to help get the word out that we're hiring. But recruitment has been a challenge, and especially way up in Northern California where I live. Behind the redwood curtain, there's not a lot of folks out here, and it kind of takes a special individual to want to kind of move up into this isolated area here. But we do have a little bit better luck recruiting down in more populous areas like San Luis Obispo or Camarillo.
Gotcha. And I don't think I've ever heard it called the redwood curtain before. I think that's my new favorite phrase for the day, which is great. The other question that I had, as I mentioned, that until you chimed in, I really hadn't heard about any other veterans sort of in this space, and I think it's great. I'm delighted to hear that NOAA and the Conservation Corps are working up and down the West Coast, and it sounds like you're expanding. Do you anticipate, or are there any plans to expand, to the Gulf, the Great Lakes, the Atlantic seaboard? Because it would seem that there's a lot of work going on and a lot of veterans in all those coasts.
Sure. So our headquarters liked our model out here in California, and after the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, they submitted a proposal to the Restore Council to start up a Gulf Corps program. It's not necessarily hiring veterans, but it's hiring folks. There are some veterans in the program, but it's geared toward younger folks to do a lot of the restoration associated with the damages caused by the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. So that is in its second year, I think, second year of implementation, maybe even third. But there is a Gulf Corps. It's not targeted towards veterans, but the model that we used is definitely being used. And TNC, the Nature Conservancy, is the group that got the contract to kind of run that program. And there's more information on that on the website too, if you just type in Gulf Corps program.
Yeah, I think that's Jeff DeQuatro at TNC in Alabama, right? Isn't that?
Yeah, I think it's actually in all the Gulf states, but
okay.
I was just kind of involved in the beginning of that, just to try to develop the scope of work for the RFP, and I've kind of been hands off of that. Our colleague Laurel Jennings has been kind of doing the nuts and bolts.
Gotcha. But it sounds like there's no plan explicitly to have a veterans component necessarily, and or on the East Coast.
Yeah,
right now.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, sounds good. Well, that's great. And Bob, I realize belatedly, would you like to introduce yourself so everybody knows your full name and affiliation in case they'd like to reach out to you?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Bob Pagliuca. I'm a marine habitat restoration specialist working for the NOAA Restoration Center in Arcata, California, and I do mostly endangered species work for restoration work and monitoring work for salmon and steelhead, and restore bays, estuaries, and rivers up here in the north coast of California.
Beyond the redwood curtain. I love it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Bob, very much. I'm glad you chimed in, and you made the conversation a lot richer. So I will go back to mute you now. So thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you.
Okie dokie. So let's see. That's pretty much all the questions that have come in. And so, Captain Al, I will, well, hang on, before I do you have anything else that you would like to add regarding engaging U.S. veterans in this restoration work that you do?
Nope. I just want to thank you for letting me kind of talk about it. And I'm glad Bob was on the line to learn more about what he's doing, too, because there might be a really good synthesis between the two programs to kind of expand our program more than just in New Jersey.
Exactly. It's one of my favorite things about these conversations. We end up having all kinds of interesting connections. So I'm delighted as well. And anything that Capt Mal can do, and Bob or Ray can do, just let me know. So I will go ahead and take the screen back. And so I will provide some upcoming information. There is the information for both myself and Captain Al. If you would like to reach out to us individually, please do so. Our next upcoming Community of Practice virtual gatherings, May 15th, 2019, 1 p.m. Eastern. So we typically do it the third Wednesday of the month. This is a little unusual because of the various holidays and breaks that are occurring right now. In May, it will be Dr. Niels Lindquist with the University of North Carolina, talking about his latest findings on the use of materials in living shorelines projects. They're doing some very innovative research and direct application, so that is going to be fantastic. And then July, we have Caitlin Lustig with the Nature Conservancy talking about the Florida Shoreline Resilience Working Group efforts down in the southern Florida. So let's see, I'm going to double check, make sure there's no more hands up or questions or anything like that. So, all right, so hearing none, I certainly appreciate all of your time. Thank you for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you virtually in May. Thank you so much, and have a great day.